Through the Leadership Lens is brought to you by Thompson Autogas. Thompson Autogas is the industry's gold standard turnkey solution for all your autogas needs. From funding to refueling and everything in between, Thompson Autogas is there to support your fleet every step of the way.
Hello and welcome to another Through the Leadership Lens, a podcast presented by the Women in Propane Council. I am Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd, and today we're so excited to have a name I think very well known in the propane industry, Leslie Anderson, the president and CEO of the Propane Gas Association of New England, PGANE, as we all lovingly know our friends in New England. So Leslie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bridget. It's great to be here. Thank you. I'm honored that you guys have asked me to share my thoughts today.
Well, we're excited about this conversation. So as you know, this podcast is about leadership. And to kick us off, would you tell us a little bit about what does leadership mean to you? It doesn't have to relate to the industry, just Leslie Anderson, what does propane, excuse me, what does leadership mean to you?
Let's see. I guess there's a million definitions of leadership, right? But I think the most important thing about leadership is the ability to make decisions and move forward. Solving problems. That's another thing I think that leadership means to me. But also surrounding yourself with really smart people. To me, if you're a good leader, you need to have lots of brains beneath you that are helping you to lead and are giving you information that helps you to make good decisions.
And you know, it's good that you say make decisions. One of the questions that I'm going to ask you now is sometimes making that decision as a leader can be a risky decision. And that's one of the questions that we like to ask our guests is, have you ever had to make a really risky decision for you as a leader or the team below you? And if so, could you maybe share one of those stories with us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you say risky, do you mean, risky in terms of it's going to be a decision that could affect people's lives? Because if you work in compliance and safety or the environment, some of your decisions that you make are really important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think from that perspective, it's important to have a strong ethical conscience and to know what the right decision is and to always be guided by what is best for my client, if you're an attorney, or my employees, if you're making a decision that impacts safety in the field. But having that ethical right and wrong is really a key important part of leadership, and always standing by that, right? As you come up through the ranks, you might get pushback sometimes from people that are trying to get you to take shortcuts or go another way or save money. And I think you have to be strong and stand up for what's right and to be ethical if it's a risky decision in that sense. But I think there's also risky in the sense of, is this going to be something that I make a mistake at and I don't get the promotion, or it's going to impact my career? People aren't going to, think that I'm old enough or I'm competent enough to do it. Those kind of risky decisions, I think you have to be confident and strong and willing to make mistakes and move forward, to get those. So I kind of see that as two questions, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's part of the navigating leadership, right? Is like what is the role versus what is the action taken? Because it can be kind of both. Leslie, when do you think you first stepped into a leadership role?
Oh gosh, I grew up with three brothers, so if you weren't a leader, you were playing cowboys and Indians back in the day when I grew up. It was really important, I think, early on to just being in a big family. I think we had lots of leaders, in the family that I grew up on, and I've always been outspoken and strong opinionated. So, having that personality definitely helps and makes it easier to be a leader. But I think anybody can learn to be a good leader as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What
Go ahead,
about in
Bridget.
your career? Was there a time that you maybe had an opportunity or an opportunity presented itself even where that decision had to be made that, yep, I'm going to step into this role or I'm going to engage in this activity, and that set you on a kind of maybe a different trajectory that an alternate decision would have maybe resulted in a different pathway?
Yeah, I think if you're strong and you're confident about a project and you want to take it on, then you should speak up and offer to do that, right? I can think of a situation, where I took on a leadership role that presented itself, where I could have backed off and just let somebody else be in charge of it. But I thought, I know how to do this. I work with all the people that do this. This is something that I can do, and I can save the company money doing it, and resources and time. And we can make this better if I step up and lead this team to do it. And so I think it's important that you consider what your strengths are when you volunteer for leadership roles. And I've always been a person that thinks that you sign up for a job, but there's things in every job that everybody is better at. And one of the things I try to do as a leader is, if I have somebody underneath me that's really excellent in this 25% of their job, is it possible that 25% could be something that's more of 75% of their job, and maybe the other 50% goes to somebody else that's strong in that area. And I think looking at the strengths that you have, the people under your team, is important too, and in yourself, to recognize that.
Yeah. And it's good to hear, you talk about teams and people below you, people above you, there's always that mentorship term that we like to throw around. And it's a great time to plug the Women Propane's mentorship program, the Knowledge Exchange. You're welcome. Can you talk a little bit about mentorship? Because I feel like sometimes being a leader, that's just a great word for it, but you're also a mentor. Do you see mentorship with the leadership role that you have right now? Do you have people that you mentor?
Yeah, I think as a woman in the propane industry or in the energy industry, no matter what the energy is, we're the minority usually when it comes out. And I have always had a job throughout my career where I've been the only woman in the field, or, the only woman in the bathroom. It seems like most of the events that you go to, right? So I've just always worked in industries that have been male dominated. And of course that's changing, with time and everything that goes on. But um, I think because there are so few women out there, we have a responsibility as women that have advanced in our careers in this industry to show the next generation, that it's possible, and that you can achieve it. You are welcomed. The propane industry, having, worked in the oil, gas, and the chemical industry in the deep South, and now working in the propane industry in New England, is night and day. I mean, the propane industry is a family-oriented business. It's got women that are daughters and wives and sons. There's a lot of women in the industry because it's a family-based business. And so I think it has always been welcoming to women in the propane industry. So I don't have, some of the situations that used to occur when I was working in other fields that are more male dominated also, that I have today. So I do think, though, that we have that responsibility to give back and to be available, to help women, because you
Mhm.
are sometimes isolated. If you're working in an office and you've got a lot of drivers and technicians, and you're the CSR, you might be the only CSR in a small office. You might have 3 women you work with, but there's another dozen that are out in the field that are guides. And I think it's important just to have those resources to talk with other women. And the women in propane group does such a great job by
Mhm.
providing that context and that ability for you to know more women in jobs similar to yours, because we are spread out in the suburbs where our industry grows.
What
Mhm.
about Leslie? Was there a mentor in your life that I mean, even outside of work, somebody who you wanted to emulate as a leader?
Well, I mean, I am always trying to do that even at this day, right? So, I mean, one of the things that I get when I go to conferences today, and I watch other people in situations similar to me, is, how are they doing the job? What are they saying? How are they communicating different things? Because a lot of my job is communicating in front of groups. So I think today, I mean, my peers, I watch Steve Aarons, I watch Tom out at Rocky Mountain, they do things differently than I do. I mean, Steve has this journalism background, and he has this way with words that's just amazing. And I, steal his sound bites if they're applicable. But I also like to watch people like Tucker, your boss, just when he gets up and speaks in front of a group. He has phrases sometimes. One of them is propane is blessed by chemistry, and I remember the day he said that, and I thought, oh my God, that's just such a great picture and summary of, the benefits of propane and how you can stuff a whole bunch of it in a little bitty container, right? I mean, it is blessed by chemistry. And that probably occurred to him as a chemical engineer and someone that's given all those speeches and things with time. But I do try to, look at those great speakers. Stuart Weedeye is another one. I mean, they don't know, and they're not, official mentors, but there are people, I think, that can inspire us throughout the industry that we can look to.
I've read this book called Steal Like an Artist. You should read that. It's really good. It's you listen to people, you watch what they do, and you just take bits and pieces and you make it into you. And it's a really good book about the outlook, about how you can become so many different levels of people. And and when you're talking about you're stealing these little sound clips or listening to Tucker Perkins, it's true. And it's good that you feed off other people. I'd like to hear that. So, leadership obviously always changes with time. And we like to say around COVID, because time changed. It went from in person to virtual really quick like that. But, talking about your leadership with your three brothers. So you've had to change your leadership role from being in a family of three brothers to pre-COVID to after COVID, and these video conferences that we're doing now with the podcast. How, in your eyes, has leadership changed, and what are some of the tools that you use to make sure that it doesn't kind of just stall out?
Gosh, that's a great question, right? So I think everybody that was a leader during COVID had to quickly adapt to Zoom meetings, right? And I remember just, about 6 months into it, having a Zoom meeting, and everybody was trying to figure out how to log in. And suddenly we had to be the IT people also,
Yeah.
which we didn't have your background. But I remember, I mean, a good leader has to be able to multitask, right? So you've got to be able to run a meeting on Zoom, while you're muting, one of your officers that's got two mics going, and he's, blacking out everything. And then somebody's texting you at the same time. I can't log in, where it all goes. I mean, you definitely have to be able to stay cool as a leader. So you can't panic. You can't panic and throw up your hands when that happens. And you've got to try to do it seamlessly, because at the same time, you're running this important board meeting now for the first time on Zoom. And so you're trying to correct the things in the background while you're still maintaining, your decorum and not panicking with everything going on. So I think problem solving is I think one of my biggest strengths that I have as a leader, and that is one of the guiding principles that's important in any group that you're leading. I think is being able to problem solve and find the way forward, and knowing what that problem is, right? So that's really important when you lead a group, is that you all know what the problem is you're trying to solve, or you all know what the goal is that you're trying to get to. And if you're the leader of that group, you need to define that up front, right? You need to tell your people, here's what we're going to do up front with it. I can think of an example when I was about 20 years ago in my career, when I worked for Dead River Company, one of the large propane companies up here in the Northeast. And they also have a big distillate business as well. And we had an acquisition of a company that was kind of the second biggest in the state of Maine that we acquired. And one of the things that we did as part of the due diligence that I was in charge of is going out and looking at the environmental and the safety compliance for the facility, and figuring out what work needed to be done to bring some of the facilities they had up to the standard that we had. And there was a few safety things that were missing that needed to be done. And then also we were pulling in their footprint. So there were bulk plants that needed to come down that we weren't going to use. There were bulk plants of ours that we needed to expand. There was a lot of tanks that needed to be moved, from 30,000 gallon above ground propane tanks to smaller distillate tanks that needed to be taken down. But what I did was volunteer, to head up this group, and we called ourselves the redeployment team. And we had 12 of us. So it was 11 guys and me again in the room. But I was the leader. And I started that with the group, pulling them in. I included people. When I had my first meeting, there were questions about why are these people coming to the corporate office? Well, these were the people that did the work on the underground tanks, on the above ground tanks, on the bulk plants, and they were distillate people and they were propane people. They ran the rail terminals. They were the people that got the work done and organized, or were the contractors to get the work finished. And I brought them in together, the propane and the distillate people, and said, these are the plants we have. This is our end game for 2 years from now. We want it to look like this. This is what it looks like today. What's the most efficient way we can do this? We're going to need overhead cranes to lift these 30-gallon bulk plant tanks off and move them from this little place down east in Maine, 200 miles inland to this other location. And that location, we need to tear down some other things and move that. And it was really interesting. Once I explained the problem and asked them, how's the best way we can do this? They started throwing out ideas about how we could save money and how we could organize together so that when we had the giant crane thing come for $2,000 a day, that he could lift up the tank here, set it there, pick up the other one, move that one. The logistics that this group brought in together. And then also the sharing of contractors, rather than competing for outside welders and contractors, they were working together as a group to bring those in. And I think bringing the experts in underneath you that have the expertise is so important, where you can sit back then and listen to the conversation and help them to plan how it's going to take place. That's really, really important to do, to collaborate and to communicate back with them too. There were a few things they wanted to do that made absolutely perfect sense in terms of logistics and why you would do it that way. But that one particular tank they wanted to move, we were thinking we might actually sell that, but it was confidential and it was under a confidentiality agreement, So there were times when I would say to the group, that's a really good idea. It's a great idea. We should do it that way, but we're not going to. And I can't tell you why. And they would look at me, but they would get it, and they'd accept that and we'd move on and go to it. But explaining why we're not going to do something some way that logically makes sense, or that is a good suggestion that someone has, I think is really important. And there were a few suggestions they had that were just way too expensive, right? So I would say, that's a great suggestion, but it's too expensive. We don't have that in the budget. It's going to take too long. It won't meet our time frame. Why are the reasons I'm not accepting your ideas as a part of my team? I think communicating that back to the people on your team makes them feel part of the team, and then they understand how to move forward. And that communication is really important. And I see leaders that don't do that. I see leaders that just say, okay, thank you all, but here's what we're going to do. And it's something completely different, and that makes people feel like they're not being heard. So you really need to respond back to your team and talk about it. And then the other thing I think is really important is to give them credit. Give credit to smart people under you. You should be advancing those smart people under you and campaigning them within your company. You don't want to hoard the smart people all on your team and restrict them from moving forward in the organization, because there's more people coming up, that can work with you and can fill in those spaces. So I think you need to have a responsibility as a leader also to help develop the people under you, and then be willing to let them go and go help someone else within the organization, or move up in the organization and do work like you're doing in the future. So don't be insecure. Leaders need to be secure in what they're doing, and insecurities, I think, is that makes the worst kind of leaders, if you're insecure, because then you're taking credit for people's things that they do. You're doing things to make yourself look good. You need to always be saying, here's what we're trying to do. This is what's best for the company. This is what's best for the employees. And really have that be your guiding virtue that you're going towards as you move forward.
Leslie, we heard a lot from your examples about the focus on communication and like that being an important skill. Obviously, honesty and integrity are incredibly important, giving credit where it's due. But what do you do outside of work to hone those leadership skills, maybe in your community or any type of professional development that you'd recommend?
So when my son was younger, I was involved in Cub Scouts with him all through that. So I remember in first grade when you could go in for Cub Scouts, we went in and I said, I would love to help out, and they said, oh, great, we need a leader for the new group
No.
coming in. And I kind of went, but I was the Cub Scout den leader all the way through.
Wow,
doing
good
that.
for
That's
you.
incredible. And he was an Eagle Scout, right?
No, he dropped out
No,
of
he didn't.
Scouts
Okay.
after Cub
Oh.
Scouts. So he did a year of Boy Scouts, and then
Yeah.
he kind of went off on more music and drama and other things.
Okay.
So I did. That was fine because when you have to cut.
Well, we do talk a lot on here, Leslie, about kind of how leadership at work oftentimes comes to life at home, right? With your family or in engagements that you have. Did you ever feel, with a son growing up, there's almost a natural tension between that, getting pulled as a leader at work or pulled as a leader at home. And I think that a lot of people who are listening to this might relate to that, right? And you want to advance your career, but you have obligations. Do you have any thoughts on kind of what your experience was?
Yeah. So a leader needs to manage stress, right? Because there are definitely, when you have kids, you're constantly pulled in different directions, right? And you've always got in the back of your head, am I being a good mom? Am I doing the right thing that's here? And am I there when my son needs me, right, for what it is? So scheduling is definitely a challenge. One of the things that resonated with me growing up, my father was an airline pilot. And so he would be gone for 2 days or 3 days or 4 days at a time. And then he'd be home for 2 or 3 or 4 days at a time. And when my dad was home, my dad was like a full-time dad. He was making breakfast. He was taking us to school. He was, doing all of those types of things. So what I try to do is really make sure when I'm home, that I'm home when I need to be for the important things. I mean, the first thing goes on my schedule are all my son's events at school and everything else, right? And I do try to schedule around those to the extent that I can. But you also have to, I think, sometimes make exceptions and forgive yourself when you do. So I remember one of his first plays he was in at school, and when he was in the end of middle school, I had an MPGA or a park event that, I had to fly out for and be at when they were doing that show. So I called the drama teacher and I said, hey, I've got to work travel. I can't rearrange it. Can I come to the dress rehearsal that week? So that evening I went and I walked in and I watched the dress rehearsal, and it was fun. And it was probably even more fun than going and just sitting in the audience.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have to try to do what you can to balance your work and what your kids do. I, as a leader, always tell my staff, family comes first. Family comes first, and your job comes second. And that's important, I think. Now you have to judge what things you can miss and what things you can't miss. And sometimes you do have to miss things that you didn't want to, but on the whole, I think that's important. And our kids need to know also that they can make it on their own. So I think it's important that your kids are strong enough, that they're not going to be heartbreaking if you don't make everything, right? I mean,
yeah, adds a little resiliency to their experience.
I love it. Quick story. You talk about stress and kids on their own. My daughter's in college, and we were visiting her last weekend in family day or family weekend. And she goes, Dad, what's wrong? You're not here. And I said, I'm really stressed out because the last 2 weeks I was traveling. She goes, do you know stressed backwards spells desserts? And I'm like, I didn't know that. She goes, eat more desserts, Dad. You'll be much happier. Like,
that's great.
Perfect. So yeah, and it is. And I remember the same thing with her. There was, you can't always be there for them, but it almost being there for the dress rehearsal still meant that you're still there. You might
Right.
miss the big production, but you were there. And to be honest, you had the best seat in the house because it was just you. So it's fun to hear that. But I think we're ready. Are you ready, Bridget, for the whip
Yeah,
round? Because if you
absolutely.
don't mind, it can kind of segue into the very first question of the whip round. Leslie, what's your favorite dessert? Since we're talking about stressed and desserts right now.
Oh, favorite dessert. Gosh. I love mint chocolate chip ice cream. That's my favorite ice cream.
Everybody always picks ice cream.
Well, that's what's on your list here. What's your favorite ice cream? So I thought about that. And
Oh, shoot. That's what you did. Got it. I see.
Well, we'll get one that's not on the list then. What do you wish you would have known when you were 16 that you know now?
Yeah. So I would say you can't change people's personalities. I am a very optimistic, happy person, and I think that everybody wants to be as happy as I am. And you really, I think you can change people's minds about decisions that they're making, but you cannot change people's personalities. So I wish if I could go back and talk to myself, I would say, take people at what they are and don't try to fix them and change them or anything along those lines.
Sound
Yeah.
advice.
Great advice. And you are a happy person. Through this entire podcast, everything you've commented on, you've had a smile on your face. And it's very contagious to talk to somebody with a smile on their face, to smile back at them. If you were to describe yourself in one word, Leslie, what would it be?
Optimistic. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
What about if you had a superpower, what would it be?
If I have a superpower.
I think you might have answered this in a magazine, didn't you?
I'm not sure, but I've always wanted to be a mermaid.
Oh, there you go.
That's the first one.
Fantastic. I love it.
I have a lot of mermaid stuff people give me. So, yeah.
I love it. Oh, I didn't. It's a nice little
I like that.
To store away somewhere.
Leslie, what is your favorite animal and why?
My favorite animal. Well, that's tough. So it would either be a cat if it was a pet, because I travel, so you have to like cats instead of dogs if you're a travel person. But I love koala bears. I've always thought those are like so adorable, right? I don't really want one. I just love the look of them. Those are cute.
There's a great show on Netflix my 7-year-old and I watch all the time called Izzy's Koalas, and it's about a family in Australia that rescues koalas, and it's fabulous.
It's great.
I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
I'll have to weigh in. That's an amazing show. Yep.
Right. What about, okay, Leslie, where's your ideal vacation, or what is your ideal vacation?
Oh, yeah. A beach somewhere warm, especially since I've moved to New England from the South. The water is cold up here. So I love a beach under the palm trees and relaxing there. I like to travel and see historical things too, but that is a great way to decompress especially when you go a million miles an hour, which I tend to do.
So being out in New England now, what do you keep in the trunk of your car?
Oh, well, right now it's full of like my luggage. I'm always traveling. So I literally keep a suitcase in my car, and I just bring clothes in and out of it because I have like an extra copy of all my toiletries and everything I need out there in my car. I live in Maine, so I have a whole bag full of bags because we can't have plastic bags in Maine anymore. We bring our own bags into the store, which is really obnoxious, but that's always floating around my car. And then I have a ton of propane information in case anybody wants it. File for full of propane information that it's a different audiences when I'm speaking, or if somebody asks me something when I'm out and about, because I cover 6 states, so I have to. I have a very messy version of my office in the back of my car,
just in case. I love it. All right, my last question, Leslie. If you were not in the propane industry, what would your ideal job be?
My ideal. So I'm going to answer this like money is no consideration. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd probably be, a practicing attorney instead of
Right.
an association person, if not. But I think I would be a great tour guide.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Wait, like on a bus or a walking tour guide? I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I took one of the jobs I had was for the outdoor group, and I took some groups rock climbing. This was several pounds ago, and I took some. I did a bird watching trip one time. I knew nothing about birds, but
and you led the bird watching.
And you led the group.
I did. We pulled over at one point, and somebody said, "What is that bird?" And I was in the front seat, flipping through the bird book, and then I just started reading. Oh, it looks like this. Why, that's me.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Yeah.
They went home like with false information. Yeah, we saw these types of birds, and you're like, yeah, it is. It's right there.
I think I just know too many interesting tidbits about different things, but I have enjoyed, taking when we go to different towns and different things. If it's some place that I know or I'm familiar with, I love giving the tour. Of filling people in as we're going along. That's just fun to do. I think
that's
interacting with people.
Perfect.
Well, now we know where we'll find you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If money
or what's in the back of your trunk.
You won't find me there because my son's applying to college. So.
Maybe in your retirement you can be.
Maybe so. That would be a great retirement. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would be. Well, Leslie, this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Spending time with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I love all of your pictures in the background that you have there, Freddie.
Oh, I was like,
that's my favorite. Yeah. That's my favorite character. I only have one at my house, but that's my favorite.
Of Groot?
Behind you, yeah.
Oh yeah, they're growing like actual trees in my office. My kids keep buying them for me, so
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Thank you guys so much. It sounds like you both have things to do, and I'm just going to keep working for the rest of the day. So enjoy your weekend, everyone. But thanks, Leslie, again, and thank you for joining the show. This has been another episode of Through the Leadership Lens, presented by Women in Propane. Be sure to subscribe, download, and share with a friend. To learn more about Women in Propane, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or online at www.womeninpropane.org. I'm Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd. Thanks for listening. Until next time.